Hi, I'm Mark Sumner, CEO and founder of Robertson Sumner. Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast, where we will share learnings, best practices, and failures with some of the biggest names in the IT industry. Hello, I'm Mark Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today in the virtual studio, I have the pleasure of Brian Day, the CEO of Fuse, in the virtual room. How are we doing, Brian?
I'm doing great, Mark. Great to be here. Thanks for having me today.
No, pleasure. Thanks for coming on. So, Brian, thanks for coming on the show. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sort of bored of doing COVID meetings and COVID presentations, etc. But what I'm more interested in about, and what the listeners are more interested about, is what's going to happen post-COVID as we come out, and what C-suite level executives are going to do with their decision making moving forward. So, I was hoping we could kick off with what you're currently seeing from Fuse, from your customer base, and what's the reaction been as we hopefully move out of this pandemic.
Yeah, great question, Mark. And I'm actually really kind of glad you don't want to talk about everybody's reaction to COVID, because it feels like you hate to just say it's not a big thing anymore, because it still is a big thing. But enough talk about it. I think everybody's kind of figured out what their work from home strategy is, or if they haven't, it's probably too late at this point in time. Yeah. And now the question really is, okay, when do we get back to work? What does that look like, and how are CIOs responding to that? So at Fuse, what we've done is, we spent, as everybody else did, the better part of March and April figuring out, okay, how can we support our customers and our partners in dealing with this crisis. And now that we've kind of gotten through that part of this, it's like, okay, what does the world look like from July 1st, 2020 through the end of 2021? Because it's really, and even getting into 2021, hard to figure out what the real world's going to look like, because there's still so much uncertainty out there. But I think we need to stop saying, well, we can't plan for uncertainty. We just need to start coming up with a plan and say, here's how we're going to deal with what we think is going to happen. Yeah. So what we've really seen is CIOs by and large did a really good job responding in Q1 to this crisis. And those that had the foresight to have good technology going into it, it was easier for them. For those that didn't, it was a little more difficult, because maybe they didn't have the tools they needed to enable their employees to get home. But now what's happened is these CIOs who spent a lot of money in the calendar first quarter, January, February, March, are saying, okay, I just spent 100% of my 2020 budget in the first 3 months of the year. Now what do I do? So what we're seeing is okay, CIOs are saying we need to rethink this, because it was actually more of a crisis spend than a budget spend. But in the meantime, what can we learn from that? And if I'm a CIO right now, we've been starting to see this, especially in the enterprise spaces, which is where Fuse plays. They're saying, okay, I was thinking about moving to UCaaS maybe in 2021 or 2022, maybe even 2023. Now they're not saying that. Now they're saying, I got to do it sooner rather than later. So what we're seeing is it's really, and we're fortunate enough to be in this space here, in the UCaaS space. This is one of the very few segments of the economy that's actually seeing a big increase in demand right now, because of the fact that CIOs are accelerating this decision making. But what they are doing, and I don't mean to just kind of ramble on here, Mark, but you can cut some of this out too. But what the CIOs are doing is they're being very deliberate in their decision making. So they said, okay, we are going to go UCaaS in the next 18 months instead of the next 36 months. But we're going to be very careful, very deliberate in how we decide, and take our time to make the right decision, because it's not a crisis at this point in time.
Yeah, and now you're seeing that, and I agree. If you're in that space, players in that space have obviously done well. I've heard people having record months and all that sort of stuff. But I'm also finding that challenging, I think maybe not such in the enterprise space, but I'm finding people are seeing challenges around the adoption of this technology into the homes, or into actually working these UC platforms, because you might have one company using Fuse, or one company using another company, or another company, and actually it's not ubiquitous throughout the actual firm. Like there's different teams using different platforms.
Right.
How do you see that affecting companies moving forward? Because as we move out of this pandemic, people are going to start thinking, right, we need an integrated solution. We need to accelerate using a UCaaS platform of some degree, but we also need the deployment and the adoption of that, and we need to accelerate that. So are you seeing customers having challenges around sort of adoption and deployment?
Yeah, and it's driven by a couple different things, Mark. One of them is that not everybody has the same kind of bandwidth at home that everybody else does, right? So you get, and the problem is if you're a UCaaS provider, you get blamed for everything, right? So if my son and my daughter decide to do an online class right now, or I say they're doing an online class. What they're really doing is playing online video games. We all know that,
Yeah.
right? But if they're doing that and sucking up all my bandwidth, and all of a sudden my video with you gets really choppy, I blame my UCaaS provider. Well, so we've got to overcome that at Fuse, and we've worked really hard to come up with some solutions that actually say, okay, to us, the most important component of a online meeting or any type of conversation is the voice. You can still have a meeting without video. You cannot have a meeting without voice. So the way we set up our software is that if it detects a degradation in the signal because of bandwidth issues of any type, the first thing we sacrifice is the video, and then it would be so we preserve at all costs. Most important. I think what happened is, no one's ever as the line with the PSTN at the office, which is the old twisted pair copper PSTN solution, but you can get really close by offering what we call an elegant software solution that preserves voice at all costs. In our opinion, that's the most important part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you see the opportunity now for Fuse coming out of this market? So as we're coming into Q3 and hopefully Q4 and 2021, where do you see the opportunity for Fuse?
We're going to continue to focus, really exclusively on enterprise, larger businesses, which is where we really do well. The global marketplace, our typical customer has offices, in multiple continents, multiple countries around the globe, and that's what we're really good at doing. I will say our going into Q3 is double what it was going into Q4, so there is a ton of interest in the space at this point. For us, is how fast are those deals going to come through the pipeline, realizing transactions. So far, they seem to be moving fairly quickly, but we're really pretty excited about that. From a product standpoint, we continue to refine our roadmap to deal with the fact that inevitably there will be a lot more people working from home in the future than there have been in the past. So let's assume that there's a vaccine. I'll be the ultimate optimist. Let's say there's a vaccine by the end of the year for COVID-19. Even if there is, you're still not going to have 100% of the office in the office. So today, companies like an space needs to be thinking about that from a product roadmap standpoint. So what's different about supporting a work from home environment than it is work from office environment? So we continue to think about that as we develop more features platform.
And for your own business for Fuse, Brian, what's been the sort of feedback from your own employees? Do they want to get back to the office, or are they happy doing home working all the time, or what will your be plans for around that?
I'm going to give you a kind of a wishy-washy answer here, Mark. It's a mixed bag. It depends where people are located. I would say, our headquarters is here in the U.S. I would say excited to come back to the office in Boston. In part, 85+% of our employees take public transportation to work. And I don't think anyone's really figured that out. We're in an office tower sharing crowded elevators, so I think there's some issues there. We have development offices in Ottawa, in Canada, where the COVID-19 virus has not really been anywhere near as difficult to deal with as it has here in the U.S. They're a little more anxious to get into the office. We have a development center in Portugal as well. They're anxious to get back in. So we continue to evaluate this, and I think what we're going to do is probably, whereas we said about 6 weeks ago, nothing's going to happen for anybody until the end of this year. What we're taking now is a more flexible approach and saying, look, we're going to evaluate this on a country-by-country basis, because there may be some places where people can get back into the office sooner than here in the U.S. And obviously that's highly likely, and we want to be supportive of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in general, Brian, what are Fuse doing to for partners to sort of enable them to be more successful as we come out into Q3 and Q4?
Especially shift partner programs. Obviously, we money with our partners in the past, having lunches, having functions, having events, those are gone now. We shifted very quickly to virtual events. We're doing, we've done a lot of webinars with partners, helping them to generate business in a different world from the world in which they historically operated. A lot of technical webinars, product education series. We're hosting partner roundtables to discuss customer challenges. And what we're really doing is educating our partners and how to provide the services to customers in this new environment, because it's a different world that they're living in, obviously, than they had been in the past. So a lot of it is doing that, providing best practices for companies, and leading by example.
Yeah, because there was a lot of, in March and April and May, to be honest with you, there was a lot of companies coming out with webinars and virtual meetings and virtual roundtables and almost podcasts like we're doing now, which I get. But I think a lot of people, I don't know about you, have sort of, will I dare to say, yeah, I've almost got a bit bored of that. There was a lot of webinars coming out in May and June about information about this, and I'm an expert in this section, and I'm an expert in COVID, and I'm an expert in cloud, when they weren't bloody experts before. They didn't know nothing about it. So how do you think the sort of customers will react now when they start seeing webinars from companies in August, September, when they've almost like webinared out? They just think, you know what, I just can't be bothered to log on anymore and listen. So how do we get that message out now?
Mark, I got to be totally honest with you. I felt I had webinar invite overload between April 1st and May 30th. I mean, I must have been invited to probably 5 per day. And you're right, everybody became an expert overnight. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. If you were an expert, how did you not see this coming? But but I mean, I can't tell you how many if I clean out my trash, my computer would speed up just cleaning out the trash from the invites from these webinars. I think that's going to continue. I think there are a lot of people that are trying to be opportunistic. I still get invited to webinars. Here's our webinar about this thing. Here's something on this. And you know what? The way we go about it is, I just don't think a blind invite is worth anything. And if my chief marketing officer came to me and said, hey, we're going to do this massive email for this webinar, I'd say, save your money. Right? Nobody, I don't think anybody responds to those things at this point in time. So ours are going to be much more targeted to people that we know. And it's going to be, hey, look, it's an invite from a person at Fuse, not this fake person, not this bot that's sending you an invite. And it's going to be on a subject that's really timely and helpful to the partner. Like, okay, Mr. Partner, how do you sell into an environment in October of 2020 that's so much different than it was in February of 2020? And what are the pain points that your customers are feeling, and how can we help you deal with those? Because I think unless the webinar is really, really focused, nobody cares.
Nobody cares. I totally agree, Brian. Because let's be honest, Brian. CEO of a global brand, you're very busy. How does someone get Brian's attention in this market when he's invited to 5 webinars a day, and quite frankly, he doesn't want to attend any of them anyway?
Yeah, right.
You're thinking, do I want to attend this webinar? No, I don't. So how does someone who wants to get your attention in this new world, as we move forward, how do you think they'd go about it?
That's a great question. Are you talking about an unrelated third party?
Yeah, someone that wants to get hold of you.
It has to be.
I'm not going to give you a mobile app, Brian. By the way, I won't get that. But you're going to, with so much noise in the market, people being subject experts and webinars, and I can navigate you through the COVID crisis, or Brian, I can navigate you post-COVID. No one's really interested in that. So when you sell Fuse out into the market, your chief marketing person, yes, how are you going to get that message out? But also as well, parties to you, how do you think people are going to approach you and think, how would they get your attention?
Well, the best way to get my attention is to reach out to me either through somebody that I already know or through some kind of connection, right? It's just a blind email is always a tough way to get through to anybody, unless you have something in the subject line or in the first sentence that's just so outrageously off the wall and either entertaining or can just save us a lot of money or make us a lot of money, then it just goes right into trash, right? I had somebody reach out to me yesterday saying, "Oh, I can save you money by helping you with your transfer pricing." I almost fell asleep before I finished reading the first paragraph. It's got to be something that's I don't even want to say outrageous. It's the best way to reach out to anybody, I think, is through a mutual contact, right? Hey, I was introduced to you, or can you make an introduction to me? LinkedIn doesn't really work, right? I don't know about you, but I don't get a lot of benefit out of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn. If somebody sends me an email though and says, "Hey, so and so, who I know and respect, referred me to you," I'll read the email. I'll listen to what they have to say, and I'll give them some time to make their pitch. That's what the best way to do it. And in my opinion, that's probably the only way to do it.
Yeah. Do you think your marketing strategy or your channel strategy will change now after you've gone through this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly tweaking it. We think we've got to get better. We think we've always got to get better. We've got to be selective in how we do it. We don't have the same kind of budget that some of our larger public, excuse me, competitors have. But we think, again, it's similar to what I talked about earlier with the focus on the webinar content or the any kind of event content. We've got to be very focused with how we deal with our partners. Choose a few of them, choose wisely, and work closely with them. I had a great call with a partner based in Chicago a couple weeks ago. It's a new partner of ours, and they are like us. They focus exclusively on enterprise. They're looking to build out an operation in the UK, which is an area that we think we need to do a better job with the partner world. So that to me was really exciting. And it's areas like that. We're not going to follow a blanket the earth strategy and be all things to all people. We just can't afford to do that, and that's not our market. We like to focus on partners that understand the enterprise sector of the market that we participate in, that understand what kind of problems enterprise customers have and help them solve those problems.
And you mentioned there about the UK. Will you sort of increase your awareness in terms of getting more heads in the UK on the hiring? Will you keep on hiring in the UK and keep on hiring across? As there's a lot of people in the UK like on these furlough schemes and potential redundancy, etc.
Yeah.
But there's also companies and vendors out there actually investing and seeing this as a massive opportunity. So are you in the latter, or would you see yourself like actually not investing in an additional headcount?
No, we've already made some selective new hires in the UK. We added another regional sales manager just in the past 45 days, based in London. We think, again, I come back to what I said a few minutes ago about we've got to be selective in where we invest. UK is one of those places that we will be investing more. It historically has been a great market for us. Will continue to be a great market, and it's I don't want to say it's an easy market, because no markets are easy markets, but it's a natural market for us. We've got in Europe, we've got a large presence in France. We've got a large presence in the UK. We've got 2 offices. We've got an office in London and an office out in Reading in the UK as well. But it's an area from a business standpoint that we expect to see more success in the future, and we understand that we need to invest in order to see success.
You mentioned earlier about enterprises now, they've spent their 2020 budget, or let's call it their crisis budget, where it's actually they've spent their money, but they're still having to sort of think, right, we need this UCaaS solution. We need this to actually operate as a business, to get our business as usual. Do you see the sort of the consumption-based models really accelerating now throughout IT in terms of whether it's UCaaS, whether it's software as a service, whatever as a service, continue? Because I'm hearing more and more people now thinking, actually, I don't want to put that lump of money up front to actually get this service going. I actually just want to do this pay-as-you-go scheme. So do you think that's now accelerated that as well? Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me to see more of that. It used to be that's not how it worked. It used to be that if someone signed up for 1,000 seats and it cost them $100,000 a year, they'd pay you $100,000 up front, and every single month you'd recognize $8,300 of revenue, and they would pay you. Didn't matter how much they used. I can see through competitive pressures and other types of business models that it's going to be more likely that people are going to say, okay, I want to be more of a consumption model. Now, offsetting that, I think, to be fair to businesses like Fuse, not that anybody wants to be fair to business, I get it, but there have to be some type of limits on things like that, because obviously we've got to go commit to our suppliers. So we host our platform through AWS. We've got relationship with multiple carriers around the globe to provide our services. They're not really that interested in a pure consumption model at this point in time. So I think what you'll wind up with is somewhat of a hybrid, where, again, maybe I'll go back to that example I just gave you, where it's a $100,000 a year customer, but you say, okay, but if business conditions require, we will allow you to drop to an $80,000 per year run rate or something like that. So there's some kind of floor in there. So it is variable, but there's some kind of floor, because there's a certain number below which we really can't go, because our costs, a certain component of our costs are fixed. Perfect.
And my last couple of questions, Brian, you mentioned earlier that April, May, and June was almost panic mode for a lot of companies. If you had the solution in place, great. If you didn't have the solution in, you're probably too late to the party anyway.
Yeah.
What do you see now as we're coming out over the next 6 months, that the feedback you're getting from customers about potentially what they need and what their plans are going to be moving forward, just generally?
I see it's much more settled, much more deliberate in CIO decision making. There's no more. Whatever their solution is, they pinned up in March and April. They've got that right now. In some cases, they did free solutions. Guys at this point probably having to scramble. Free solutions won't work. But for the most part, it's the CIOs. I mean, CIOs are a very conservative bunch, and they don't hit the panic button often. And when they do, they get out of that mode really fast. So what we're seeing is they've quickly gone back to business as usual, and they're being methodical in their decision making. They're asking all the right questions. They've learned that, okay, what is your security story? How can I be comfortable that this is a secure solution? They're checking all the boxes. And I will say that you go back to the March, April timeframe, they weren't checking all the boxes, a lot of them. We were seeing CIOs kind of just scrambling, saying, I'm sending 500 people home next week. How do I enable them quickly? And now what they're doing is saying, okay, I don't want to do that again. What's the right permanent solution? How do I get the right amount of security, connectivity, feature, function? What's the right decision for me in the long term? So they're making decisions that are going to last them, 5 to 10 years as opposed to 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my last question for you, Brian. You've obviously, you're a CEO of a global organization. You've had to navigate through this pandemic yourself. As we've come out there, your planning must be changing on a week by week or a month by month basis, absolutely yourself. So, is there anything that you've sort of learned that you think actually will carry forward as well? We think actually I will continue to do that for Fuse, or we might navigate slightly differently.
Yeah, I'd say the one thing that we've learned about ourselves is that we measure everything. We measure everything that we do pretty closely. We did not lose any productivity when we sent people home. And back in March, when we first made this decision, my expectation was, okay, we're going to see a drop off, right? I mean, there's no way that people, when 100% of our employees are working from home, that they're going to be as productive. We've always had a certain segment of our worker population working from home. Salespeople by nature generally are remote. Sales engineers, and even some of our engineers as well, we're working from home. But we never had 100% of people working from home. And for certain departments, it doesn't happen naturally. Finance is an example, legal is an example, even engineering to some extent. Engineers they tend to work better when they're together. But the fact that we did not lose any productivity when we sent everybody home, to me, was pretty amazing. And I credit the technology that allows us to do that. To me, we have our engineers talk all the time through Fuse. Every call that we do at Fuse, for the most part, includes video, so you can keep those one-on-one relationships that you have with people. The one thing I have said is that just quickly touching on the COVID crisis. Imagine if this had happened 15 years ago. Given where the technology was back then. I know the world economy has been hurt in the past 4 or 5 months. It would have been shuttered 15 years ago. There were a few solutions out there, but there's just no way that the bandwidth that the world had at that point in time could support 1/10 of what we're doing right now. So, in some ways, I don't want to say we're fortunate, because it doesn't feel like we're very fortunate, but at least it happened at a time when we had the technology and the solutions that enabled people to transition somewhat gracefully.
Yeah, and you know what? You're right. Even if it hadn't been 15 years ago, there was firms doing it. But my God, they didn't have that many customers that are adopting it. That's for sure. It would have been an absolute tsunami of a problem if it had happened. I completely agree with you. So, almost, I think you're right. I'll tell you what, my last point, I think, Brian, I think, the whole IT community, lots of unsung heroes in that, because they really have kept, even though the economy's gone down and people are struggling, my God, if they hadn't have been what we had, it would have been devastation. Thanks for joining us and listening to another episode of our Channel Chat podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard and are listening on iTunes, please could you give us a review and subscribe in order to get the newest episodes as soon as they're released. Otherwise, as always, we release an episode every Thursday at midday, so hopefully you can join us then.